things aren't looking too good. We did what we could. You can make your choice between the two, but you're the one who's getting screwed.
Hey everybody, I'm Birdsnake. This is my good friend Chris Spurrier.
Chris Spurrier here.
And we decided to do a podcast, and this is the Fido's Revenge podcast. And I thought like we should be doing this because I watch a lot of podcasts. Like I watch the Joe Rogan podcast, and I watch political stuff. I watch Your Mom's House. I listen to Guitar Wank. I like podcasts. It's like when I'm not listening to music, I'm listening to talk. And I think you like a lot of what kind of podcasts do you like?
Well, also side note to what you said. We'll talk on the phone 2 or 3 times a week for 2 hours at a time.
It's a podcast with no audience.
Yeah. So for years we've been saying we should do this as a podcast. People might want to hear it. Maybe they won't. But in regards to what I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts. But Your Mom's House. I love all the comics. I love Your Mom's House. Did I already say that?
You already said that.
Joe Rogan. I listen to almost every Joe Rogan.
We're nervous. It's our first time.
But I do listen to music podcasts, but specifically punk rock podcasts, and even more specifically, Turned Out a Punk, which is fronted by Damian Abraham, who, if you don't know who he is or who his band Fucked Up, incredible guy, incredible band, Canadian, weed activists, all that good stuff. I've always wanted to be interviewed on that podcast, though he generally only interviews famous people or well-known people. And the reason for that is because he starts podcasts always the same way, which is, how did you get into punk rock? How did you first hear about the genre? And I've always wanted to be asked that question myself.
How did you get into punk rock? How did you hear about the genre?
I was going to ask you first, but do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. So I discovered music at an early age, decided I wanted to be a musician, kind of organically. You were different. You came from a musical family.
Music family.
I did not come from a musical family. But I discovered music at an early age, and I discovered The Doors for some reason. It was like, that was the first band I really remember being into.
Doors movie?
Pre-Doors movie.
Yeah, pre-Doors movie.
I was 12. Or I was like 11, 12-ish, 5th grade, 6th grade. So we're talking like 90-ish.
My dad was into The Doors, so
and this was even before like Nirvana, which was obviously a big, huge deal for me and you know.
Yeah.
But before Nirvana, there was a girl at my school named Katie, and she had an older sister named Betsy. Katie introduced me to, she was like, oh, you like The Doors? You'll love the Sex Pistols and this movie called The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
They're really not related.
They're not related, but that was kind of my introduction into punk rock. Like, she talked about punk rock. And I fell in love, and I knew this was what I had to do. Now, side note to that, I do have one other instance in my life when I was probably 7 or so. I played hooky from school with my dad, and we went to Six Flags. And waiting in line for one of the rides, there were some dudes with mohawks and shit, like leather jackets and mohawks. I saw them, and I remember my dad saying something to the effect of, like, if you ever come home looking like that, I'll kick your ass. And I remember thinking, like, that's my tribe. That's my folks. Yeah, so anyway, so this girl, Katie, she introduced me to Rocky Horror Picture Show and Sex Pistols. And almost immediately, I started scouring for more punk rock. I went to the mall with them one Friday evening, her and her older sister, which was where there was a congregation of all of these punk rockers hanging out in the food court, smoking cigarettes, because back then you could smoke cigarettes.
Smoke in the mall.
Smoke in the mall, at the food court, smoking cigarettes.
Giving away our age group.
And to make a long story short, I remember very specifically that I was wearing a John Lennon shirt, and I remember exactly what it said, but it was lyrics to one of the songs. But
what song?
I don't know the name of the song.
What's the lyric?
But it was like, love is real, real is love, love is feeling, feeling love, love, blah, 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 etc., etc. So anyways, I was wearing that, which I thought was very counterculture of me, but I was also wearing a dog chain with a padlock on it, a la Sid Vicious. And I remember an older punk rock gentleman telling me that I was all mixed up and I needed to learn.
When you say older punk rock gentleman, are you talking about 15-year-old?
Yeah, 14, 15 maybe. But no, he was one, I think I've told you about him previously, that on your motorcycle jacket, you had the little piece that went over and buttoned down. You could hang stuff on
Coffee
it.
cup.
And he had a coffee cup hanging from it, like a metal coffee cup. So I assumed that he was either homeless or just so punk rock that he needed to have a cup at the ready all the time.
Just in case.
So, yeah. So that was kind of my introduction to punk rock. But also, and I want you to go too, but I want to explain that, that this was in a time when there was no internet. There was no Spotify. There was none of that. So it was scouring the CD stores, overhearing names of bands, and finding stuff that you thought looked cool and buying it and hoping that it was.
Yeah, and you get one album. One shot. You couldn't take it back
that's
either.
True.
You get one album.
And they cost the same then just about as they do now. Like it was 15 or 16
It might
bucks.
have been more then.
Right.
It was more then.
But I remember getting very lucky. I remember no one told me about the Misfits or the Circle Jerks. Oh, those were the two bands that I first found organically just looking at the record covers.
They had cool looking record
tape
covers.
and buying them.
Tapes.
And then it was just a journey from there. I mean, then I think shortly after I went to that boot camp thing when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point during that time, all of my friends discovered Green Day. And
that's about when I got into punk.
Yeah. So what do you got?
Well, I think it was 1992 or I don't know. It's the summer before 7th grade.
So post Nevermind.
Summer before 7th grade. Nevermind was out, but it was. I didn't know how big it was yet.
Okay. I
had Nevermind.
Right.
It's funny because I was listening to it on a tape of it on a tape deck in my yard, and Daniel, the bad kid from our neighborhood when we were kids.
Yeah.
He was like, "Said Nirvana," and I was like, "Yeah, I like Nirvana."
Yeah, of course.
You know, I did. I mean, I had the tape. And what's funny is my dad at the record store. My dad was like, "You should get that one." I don't know if he heard it on the radio or what.
Okay.
Funny. That's how I got Nirvana. Nevermind. But so it was kind of that time period, and then a friend, my best friend's sister was dating a guy.
Who's it?
My best friend's sister Jessica was dating a guy named Bobby.
Oh, right.
And Bobby was like, "Hey, I think you should hang out with my brother Matt." And so they set up a play date for us, and we were like, I was like 11 and he was 12 or something. And me and Matt got together and recorded on a Tascam Porta studio. For the first time we ever hung out, we recorded.
I never knew this.
Yeah, that's how I met Matt. Was Jess and Bobby set me up on a play date with.
That is very cool.
Yeah. So
Matt's in some great bands. There's one called 41 Gorgeous Blocks that you can actually look up on Spotify. His new band, This Kills Me. Incredible songwriter.
Yeah. So one day Matt was like, "Hey, I'm going to the record store with my brother. Do you want to go?" And we went, and I remember looking through all sorts of stuff, and somehow Bobby steered me toward buying Operation Ivy Energy.
Beautiful.
And I bought Operation Ivy Energy, and I took it home and I listened to it, and I thought, this is weird.
I remember that feeling too, dude.
It didn't sound like alternative music. It didn't sound like rock music even, really.
I'm not trying to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No.
I did that with Dead Kennedys because I had overheard people talking about Dead Kennedys, and I was on a vacation with my mother in New Braunfels or something like that.
Right.
And we went to a little CD store, and I remember finding a Dead Kennedys CD and brought it home and thinking, what the fuck is this shit? Like, this is the worst shit ever.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard it, I really, like, it didn't hit me yet.
Dead Kennedys just kind of sounds like a guy making a fake voice when you first time you hear it. That's kind of how Operation Ivy felt. Like,
really? Like fake?
What is this voice? And the guitar was weird. It was...
So I had never
really heard dub or reggae. Like, I had never really heard reggae. Like, I heard Bob Marley, but I hadn't really heard reggae. I was like 12, you know? So, kind of Operation Ivy was also the first reggae band I heard in a way. I mean, they're not reggae, but in a way they were. So I got that.
Reggae.
I got that. Nah. I listened to it a lot. And at the exact same time, not the same week or anything, but the same moment in time, I got the Beastie Boys' Pollywog Stew.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, killer.
And Beastie Boys' Pollywog Stew is a killer punk album.
Yeah.
Egg Raid on Mojo, you know? And I listened to it a lot.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I listened to that a lot. And that's really the first punk album I got super into. I learned the songs on guitar on that. That was the first punk album I learned the songs on guitar too. But I'd still listen to that Operation Ivy CD. It was a tape. No, it was a CD. Some of my first CDs. My first CD was Beastie Boys' Check Your Head.
It's a good one.
First CD I
ever owned. A really good CD.
So the same thing happened again not too long later. Matt was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Bobby's gonna take us to the record store. I'm gonna get the new Green Day album."
And that was Dookie.
Yeah.
And they were already into Green Day.
They were already into Green Day.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like crazy, but this is something we talked about earlier today, that it's weird that at that time, this small group of dudes
from Grand
Prairie, Texas, were listening to stuff that was on a very small and already fleggling label.
Yeah, some little independent California label.
It's amazing. But anyways, continue. Sorry.
My mom worked with a lady whose husband opened a record store like 10 minutes from Grand Prairie, and they sold this Lookout Records stuff.
You're talking about Offbeat?
Offbeat.
I didn't know your family knew that guy.
Yeah.
Jeff was his name.
Jeff. My mom worked with his wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was there was a kind of a time where, well, I actually worked at the record store afterwards.
But I got Operation Ivy and Green Day Kerplunk and stuff like that from like one of those mall Musicland or something.
Really?
From a mall record store.
Sam Goody or whatever it was, yeah.
Wasn't Sam Goody, that wasn't a thing.
Well, there was Musicland and was it Musicland? Is that what it was called?
Maybe.
Something like that. I know what you're talking about though. There was one on the first floor.
Uh-huh.
And then there was one on the upper floor past the
one that had the posters, that had a lot of posters in the back. Yeah. Is where I got Operation Ivy Energy and where I got Kerplunk and Dookie.
Okay. Well, so here's something. Let's talk about this too. So, because we've already mentioned Nirvana. Both of us have already mentioned Nirvana. The fact is that when we got into punk rock at a time when, if you were on a major label and you were doing anything good for yourself, you were a sellout. No one gave a shit about you.
That's true.
Yeah. So, as soon as Nirvana came out, almost as soon as Nirvana came out, and I secretly loved Nirvana, I was involved in a counterculture as an impressionable teen that taught me that I shouldn't love Nirvana because they were sellouts already.
I was in Nirvana for a good 6 months before I was like, Nirvana's sellouts.
Me too. But the fact is that in hindsight, looking now, they kicked the fucking doors open.
Oh, dude, they were awesome.
They were a punk rock band that kicked the doors open. And if you listen to any punk rock documentary with all of the documentees being about 10 years older than us, every one of them will say the same thing. That they remember where they were the first time they heard Smells Like Teen Spirit or whatever.
That makes sense. It was the first, the only real word for it's alternative rock music that anybody heard.
Yeah, really. I mean, there was other things.
Porno for Pyro, Jane's Addiction was out at that same moment.
Yeah, but man, there was something
Been
different.
Caught Stealing,
Yeah, I know. I mean, there was also...
But it wasn't heavy. It wasn't hard.
Right, I mean, because I was into the Chili Peppers when I was 11.
Oh, yeah, I was big time into that.
And I was way into that too, but there was something, like Nirvana, when that album came out, it was really, like, it had some energy.
Also, you could say Nevermind and Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Pearl Jam 10. There's a moment when we had all three of those albums on rotation.
And that's true. And I remember very specifically being like, I can't let my punk rock friends know. But I was making mixtapes that would be like one side Pearl Jam, one side Misfits, Circle Jerks. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the thing with that is, you could only fit one Pearl Jam album on one side, but you can fit a Misfits, Circle Jerks, and
even
whatever Black Flag album on the other side. But so, we had a very interesting history too with how we ended up meeting all of these people that were kind of our little group,
and they found the same stuff
at the same time,
either through us and our group. I mean, I'll be honest, I was a music bully. I'd be like, you don't know who Green Day is? You're stupid. Listen to this. And I'd make a tape for somebody and be like, listen to that, and then come back and talk to me.
I will say that I was also very staunch at the beginning in that I was like, I like old school punk rock. And this is, mind you, this is all
You always were.
this was us being stupid teenagers. But I will say this. I remember very specifically Phil R. I don't know if I should mention full names on a podcast, but remember Phil R.
Yeah.
At school one day, he goes, you need to listen to this. And it was Punk and Drublick. And he played the song Perfect Government for me. And that song, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about the first time I heard that song and how I thought, holy shit, there's never been music that sounds this good. And to this day, I listen to everything.
That's one of the greatest albums of all time.
It is. But the fact is that to this day, because of that moment, I listen to that style of music, that genre of punk rock,
skate punk,
90s Fat Records sound more than any other thing.
I always thought that was skate punk.
I mean, yeah, skate punk, whatever. Yeah, that's what I listen to more than anything. Still to this day, because of that moment, it changed my life. Now, speaking of that, something we kind of mentioned earlier was Matt Riggle, who we discussed earlier, gave me the term punk damaged. And what that entails is that we were into punk rock music, which meant that it was uncool to listen to anything else.
Before we go completely into punk damaged.
Okay.
So the Green Day thing collided with my mom knowing the offbeat records.
Right.
And she took me there, and they were like, what do you like? And I was like, I like Green Day. And they were like, and they were like 40.
Yeah. I remember the guy had a Ramones haircut.
Had a Ramones haircut. Yeah, they was like, if you like Green Day, you're gonna really like Screeching Weasel and the Queers and this new NoFX album. And that's how I got Punk and Drublick.
No shit.
Yeah. And my grandma was sick at the time, and I'd have to go sit at the hospital, and I'd have a Discman with the little headphones with little puffy things on them. I'd listen to that NoFX album over and over.
I have a similar story with that.
Something off of Screeching Weasel Wiggle gave me the impression that anything that wasn't punk wasn't cool. And that's how I became punk damaged.
You know, mine was more, I think, I don't know how I got that idea. I think it was just that when I discovered that I was into punk rock and that, I'll tell you what it was. Oops. I was not a great musician when I was younger. It took me, I was a little later in developing as a musician than a lot of my friends. But when I started getting into punk rock, I realized it didn't need to be that good. You know?
Yeah, because you were great at punk rock.
It was okay. Like, you just did it. You just played what you could. And
I've always considered you to be a good musician.
I don't know.
This is your
well, no, I don't know if you remember, but there were a time when we had a band, and when I say that, what we did was after school, we would play Green Day covers in your
Somebody would leave their drums at my house.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was at one point...
Matt left those drums
I was
at my
kind
house.
of at one point told, no, dude, we don't want to jam with you for a while. And I'll tell you what I did. I don't know if you remember that even.
No.
But what I did
Nick
was
Bertner?
I went home and I had a Squier Stratocaster and a tiny crate amp. And for a year, every day I would come home from school and I would play along with Green Day, Operation Ivy, Propaganda. And I learned how to play music from those punk rock albums. And then I came back and I was a decent... I would not say I'm a decent musician, but that's how I learned
how to play by ear. I learned how to put on a record and learn the songs.
Me too, yeah.
From listening to punk rock.
Me too.
Before punk rock, like Pearl Jam and stuff, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but I had a book you bought from the music store with a tab in it.
I bet you could buy at those same music stores where you bought the...
Yeah.
Back then you could,
The music store that sold CDs, tapes, posters,
so funny.
Music books.
But yeah, we, I mean, it's interesting that it's a different... A lot of the people that might even hear this, like if this becomes something where the people that listen to this are the people that are from your channel, Bird Snake Brown.
Yep, Bird Snake Brown.
Shout out. Those people may not have any, and that's something that I
don't talk about punk to them very much.
I know, and that's something that it keeps me grounded in my life to this day. That you and I have been in situations where there are 500 people in a club that's supposed to hold 100 that is there for a band that nobody's really heard of.
You're not supposed to know who they are.
But to us are rock stars.
Yeah.
And there's people that are so excited that they're hanging from rafters and stage diving and crowd surfing.
Remember how hot it is in a
overcrowded punk club?
Breaking the occupancy. Yeah.
It's amazing to me though that like that ethos, and you and I have kind of, there was a time, maybe getting way ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, because I still want to get to...
The punk damaged.
Well, after... I don't even really want to get into this, but there's another moment a few years later where I got Screeching Weasel Kill the Musicians and Propaganda. That's when I got Propaganda. That really was life-changing for me.
Yeah, me too.
But one of the things it did was changed my opinions about life. You know,
I know what you mean by that.
The lyrics, I formed my opinions off that, and I was like 15, you know?
Well, you know, one thing we're leaving out right now is that at this time, we're getting into this, we had a band.
Yep. It was called Fido's Revenge, and that's why this is the Fido's Revenge podcast. This is a very fitting episode number 1.
Yeah. And we were good. But in hindsight, I think we were really good for our age. We were children. When
I listen to back the few recordings I have, it's fantastic for kids.
For kids, it's really good.
It's honestly pretty good for grown-ups. Like,
yeah.
It's
good songwriting. He was the main... Chris Birdsnake was the main songwriter. I wrote some of the songs. I played bass, sang. Birdsnake played guitar. And a lot of our songs were...
And Matt Riggle played drums.
Yeah, Matt Riggle played drums. Dave played drums.
Our friend Dave played drums.
We had a few drums.
I consider Dave to be the first drummer of Fido's Revenge.
Me too.
And I consider Matt Riggle to be the drummer of Fido's Revenge.
I can see that, yeah.
You know what I mean? He played drums on the recordings.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely...
Dave became a bass player, I think.
He started
as a bass player.
But Dave's a guitar player now. But anyways...
Yeah.
You wrote really good punk rock. So here, okay, let me take a step back.
My mom was always writing. Her and Brad would get together when I was a kid and write songs. So I saw the songwriting process.
Yeah,
I just kind of understood verse, chorus, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus.
And then when you
I didn't even use a bridge. Back then,
of course. Well, then when you get a band like the Ramones or Screeching Weasel in your repertoire, and you're writing songs based on that, it becomes like, oh shit, I can totally do this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can totally make these songs happen.
I can even make something meaningful.
Right.
It doesn't take that many lines to say something.
Yeah. And so we would play really fast punk rock music. We were too young to get into bars. So we would
we
throw shows in your garage sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes we would take over the park. We wouldn't rent it. We would just go there.
Yeah.
And invite friends.
One of like people still to this day, and we're getting old, and people still to this day will be like, I was at your house that time y'all had that party where y'all played that show. When we started to play at the park.
Oh, yeah.
At Friendship Park.
The cops came and shut us down.
The cops came and shut us down, and I was like, let's go to my house. Nobody was home. My mom showed up while that was going on. There was like 50 kids, 20 kids in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody mentioned it to me recently, actually.
That's pretty interesting. I had a couple of years ago, a guy go, I know you, are you a musician? You're from a band? And I go, yeah, Steelers? He goes, no. I go, Werewolf? No. Controlled by Remote? No. Jerkins? No. And I go, Fido's Revenge? He was like, yeah, that's it. I was like, that's like 25 years ago or something.
Yeah.
But no, so point is, we started listening to this music. We started writing songs. You were a really good songwriter for your age in regards to okay, so there's also this idea of punk rock that it's like this anti-establishment, and it is. But there was also this side that our group got into.
It's pop punk or surf punk or love punk. I mean,
I wanted to call
I heard
our
the
album,
Queers and said I can write songs about girls,
right?
And everybody will listen to them.
Well, I wanted to call our album. I think we argued about this for our album, Fido's Revenge.
Silly songs
for a soft heart, because that's kind of how it felt. But the fact,
what did I want to call it? Romance novel.
That's right.
That's only because I cut a picture off of a book cover and was like, we can
literally had like fucking Fabio on it or something.
That's some big plagiarism.
It is. But I think that we ended up using a picture of Elvis.
That's a different one.
Oh, that was a different one.
Our friend Becky has the one with the Elvis cover, but she doesn't have the tape.
What the fuck?
She has the cover.
Man, I wish I still had those. You know, there was a time where I would take the tapes that we had made.
We need to go on Facebook and be like, does anyone have the actual
We
audio
should.
tapes from Fido's Revenge?
I should. I would get the tapes and I would take them and I would take my home stereo system and then a little tape recorder. And I would, this is what we had to do back in the day, kids. If you wanted to do anything creative, you had to use multiple tape recorders. And I would put samples before every song.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Wish I had one of those.
Me too,
Fido's
dude.
Revenge mixtape.
Thought about that all the time.
Like you put clips from VHSs in between.
Oh yeah, and I'd also like go on AM radio to where you and like go through the
turn the dial.
stations and stuff, and
I remember that.
yeah, it was great, dude. It was good stuff.
Wish I had that.
But no, I think we really carved out a little spot for our specific scene in Grand Prairie, Texas. And we even, it's funny because I think about the guys that I'm still friends with, Dave and Justin, who were from another town over.
Yeah.
And the fact is we didn't go and hang out with them.
The Duncanville group.
Yeah, they made a point to come and hang out in our scene.
I was at it was called Sound Source. I was
remember
at Sound Source. There was a used CD store next to the grocery store, and the guy that works there came in and was like, "There's a guy out there that's asking if you're Chris Brown. Do you want me to do something?" He was,
Really?
yeah, he was ill. You know, remember the guy that ran it? There were two guys that ran it. And he thought I was.
I just
he
remember
thought
a
somebody
younger guy
wanted.
named Sean.
He thought somebody wanted to beat me up. I was like, maybe let me go out there. I went out there. It was Justin Wood. He was like, "Are you Chris Brown?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm Chris Brown." He's like, "I heard you like Screeching Weasel." That's how I met Justin. Somehow, 2 towns away, he heard I like Screeching Weasel and came to Grand Prairie.
From my friend
You know
Tiffany.
how? Oh my gosh.
She she ended up going to Duncanville.
Oh my gosh.
You guys should probably hang out with Chris and Chris or whatever. Yeah, that's I've never pieced that together until right now.
That's funny.
But that's got to be how.
Yeah, that makes sense. And he introduced me to Cliff Bartosh, who became a baseball player,
Professional.
and Dave. Cliff was the drummer, Dave was the bass player, me and Justin were the guitar players. And he told me, "You know, we should really call it the Neighbors." About a year later, I found out the Neighbors was a mildly successful local band in San Diego.
where he was from.
Yeah, he's from San Diego. Name stealing. Who steals a band name, Justin?
Punk rock, bro.
Who steals a band
punk
name?
rock. But no, it's interesting. Like the point I was trying to make though was that like we had a group of people, and I don't want to say it seemed like a collective unconscious. I don't want to say we started it.
No, because we got it from other people.
Right.
You know?
But in our group,
Well, there was the older group, and I don't know any of their names, and I didn't know any of them, but I knew people that knew people whose older brothers knew them. But like the downtown Dallas, the tattoo scene, they brought it here somehow.
Yeah.
I don't
Fair
know
enough.
how.
Fair enough. But yeah, so we had a little scene, and we hung out in a parking lot, by the way, that we called 3P.
3P.
And I'm still going to get a 3P tattoo one of these days. I really am.
Cool.
Really am. But the point I was trying to make is that we didn't go to Duncanville. These guys came to hang out in our little scene.
Yeah.
And they're still some of my best friends.
It's weird.
You know, isn't that
It's
really
weird,
strange?
yeah.
Like I talk to Justin almost every day.
Yeah.
Just as often as
You know,
talk to him.
there was a subset of people from Arlington that were into the same stuff, and most of them found it some other way. I don't know how they found it.
Man, that's so weird. It is really strange.
Kaylee, Mandy, Jeremy.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know how they got into it. And I'm going to hypothesize they got into it through the Christian punk scene.
Well,
because
guys,
that's what was really going on in Arlington.
this was a time before Reddit or Instagram or anything. And the reason I'm saying that is because I know you've heard this all before on punk podcasts or whatever, or punk documentaries, but the networking was literally done by if you see a guy skateboarding or if you hear about a guy in another town that listens.
Good example of this. When I was getting ready to go to 9th grade to go to high school for the first time, I bought a notebook, a blank binder. I think it was white. Take that back. It was black.
One of the canvas ones?
No, it was one of the plastic ones, and you could erase onto them, and it would turn white.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I erased punk band names all over my notebook.
Of course.
So the day I walked into 9th grade, I was like, anybody know what this is?
It was a flag. You were running a flag up to say who's...
Also, I wore a leather jacket with studs.
Right, okay.
So if there was anybody else that knew, they saw me and were like, hey, there's a punk here.
Here's a funny story. Justin Wood told me that when he was in junior high and he was getting into punk rock, before that he was into the hippie stuff and would draw peace signs. And he learned how to turn all of the peace signs that he had drawn on his stuff into Dead Kennedy's logo. Isn't that funny?
Turn them sideways. Add a D.
But yeah, so the whole point is like our whole networking. It's crazy because we were on the tail end of that. Like I see all these old punk documentaries and older guys that were into punk.
Yeah, we were kids, really.
Yeah, but we hear all these old documentaries about, we traded tapes and stuff, but it was still really that way. Like, we couldn't just go and find something. You had to hear about it, or someone had a mixtape, or like, a lot of mine came from Justin, but there was also...
He turned me on to Maximum Rock and Roll. And then the record store in Arlington had Maximum Rock and Roll.
Yeah, that's true.
But I hadn't bought any because I'd never heard of it, but Justin mentioned it to me. This is the summer before 9th grade.
Right.
Or 9th grade, maybe.
And that was the punk rock rule book.
And that opened my eyes to all the other...
Well, beyond that, we had a few guys that were a little older than us, like Bobby we talked about, but then Chad came along. Remember Long Shirt Chad?
Long Shirt Chad.
Because he always wore a polo shirt that literally hung to his knees. Long Shirt Chad.
It was kind of the style of the time.
Kind of. I mean, we wore Jinkos. We can't talk too much shit. But Chad brought us all of these bands that were in the same genre, same kind of punk rock.
He turned me on to Crimpshrine.
I love Crimpshrine.
Crimpshrine's great. And 15, I knew about 15, but I didn't know about Crimpshrine, and I don't know the exact details, but I think 15 is just an offshoot of Crimpshrine. Some of the guys, or one of the guys...
I'm not real. I can't.
Those two bands though were some. They may not even be any of the same members, but somehow those bands were connected.
They seem familiar.
He was like, "You like 15?" He's like, "You heard Duct Tape Soup?" I was like, "What's that?"
Yeah,
you know?
I'm trying Duct Tape Soup.
Yeah.
So, but with him, he introduced me to a band called Reagan Youth.
Yep.
And Reagan Youth kind of changed my trajectory again when I realized that what I really liked, even more than punk rock, was American hardcore. Minor Threat, Black Flag, Bad Brains.
It's funny that you say that about Reagan Youth changing your trajectory, because I had this Reagan Youth tape, and I don't even remember what songs were on it or what the tape was called, and it was a tape, and I got it from like not a garage sale, or it's like from a music store, but it was in like the $2.99 bin.
Right.
And it's what led me to listen to British oi music.
Interesting.
Reagan Youth. I was seeking out more music that sounded like that, and found
Cockspur.
One of those oi hits.
Yep, I remember you having that.
One of those oi hits compilations. I heard
Blitz
that.
And Cockspur.
I heard that and was like, this sounds like Reagan Youth, because there was this one Reagan Youth tape that just sounded a little bit different than punk, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that led me down a completely different path, which was and it's the one that I still find the most prevalent to me, I guess, is American hardcore, when, you know, Black Flag, Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Reagan Youth, all those bands are the most important to me now, I think. And, you know...
It's funny because just this moment, I'm realizing that Reagan Youth is referring to the Ronald Reagan era.
That's really funny. Dude, you should look into the singer of that band. Had a really... Like, it's pretty hardcore. Like, he died in a bad way and stuff.
It's an interesting biography.
Really, really interesting guy. But yeah, so let's kind of change topics a little bit in regards to what we had discussed.
Yeah,
earlier,
we still have to talk about Punk Damage.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Is Matt Riggle, who we've already mentioned once or twice in this before,
he's one of, like, it's funny because honestly, I haven't been friends with Matt for 25 years, but I can still consider him one of the most important friends that I ever had. It's weird.
Pivotal. He's a pivotal dude. He's also...
He gave me a ride to school, a ride home from school every day in 9th grade. My mom paid him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Also, Matt, I don't want to quote this wrong. I don't know if he directed. I know he wrote the Descendants documentary, Filmage. Which is
that's a big deal.
I mean, it's you can find it on Amazon Prime, I believe. Now it's an incredible documentary about.
I'll put a link in the description.
Yeah, incredible. And he's one of our great. I messaged him tonight, actually, earlier tonight. Great guy.
What's the other documentary you saw? So I'll put a link to that.
Yeah. The other documentary I watched tonight, which kind of got us on the subject we're on tonight. Is
you came and I know what I want to talk about.
Yeah. It's called Turn It Around, the Story of East Bay Punk. And what's interesting about this is that it specifically covers the exact genre we were into of punk rock, which wasn't a very serious, politically motivated. It was like happy.
It was almost psychedelic punk and a lot of it.
Yeah, really.
And I could almost, and this is something that we haven't even discussed, but I could almost say that I got into Can of Pork.
Yeah.
It's fun. There was a Lookout Records compilation called Can of Pork.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to that just over and over and over. And it's another one I got from like the first time I went to Offbeat. They recommended a few things, and I walked out with that
so
too.
Interesting. By the way, side note, something I learned from that movie today. Larry Lalonde from Primus was in Corrupted Morals.
Oh, interesting.
So Primus was an early
it's an offshoot
Gilman Lookout band.
Weird. I mean, I know that they're from the Bay Area.
Yeah. But yeah, so, but this whole, the idea is this genre, when we're talking about punk rock, I'm sure people that, if there's people that will see this or listen to this that are not familiar, will think of punk rock as just a super aggressive, loud, angry music. And it's not necessarily not
worst case scenario, they're like, oh, you mean like Blink-182?
Fair enough.
It's fine.
Fair enough. That's fair, but the point is...
I saw them open for some... I want to say they opened for Green Day in Fort Worth before Dookie was big. And they were like 12.
I'll tell you that I remember very specifically getting a compilation that my mom bought me for Christmas, and it had a Blink-182 song on it. And I told all of my friends at the time, this band is going to be fucking enormous.
And they were.
And they were. But point is that, yeah, so that's more of kind of where I'm going. And not that I was way into Blink-182, but the fact is that there was this subsect that we listened to that was very rudimentary, very three-chord, but very poppy, very, like, pop sensibility, very love songs and shit, man. Like,
yeah.
It wasn't about fucking the government.
I was, like, just wrapped up in these Screeching Weasel and Queer's love songs.
Me too for a while, yeah.
And they didn't just, it wasn't just like love songs.
Hey, cheers me.
They were like love song.
Cheers
to good podcasting.
Yeah, for sure.
It's funny because when it's bourbon, you do a cheers, but you just go.
Yeah, that's fair.
They were love songs like the Beach Boys would. Do you know what I mean? They were almost like surf love songs. They were not just a guy trying to get a girl. They were like epic love tales in these little songs.
Yeah.
Like Deborah Jean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that rhymed. I didn't mean to rhyme.
I think he says that in the song.
But yeah, you know what I mean? It's like that song could have been a Brian Wilson song.
Yeah.
You know?
Or a Bryan Adams song.
Or a Bryan Adams song.
No, you're right.
Or it could have been an Elvis song.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely, dude.
You know, I got really wrapped up in that. And Mr. T Experience is also a love song. Shout out to Frank, who communicates with Amanda on Instagram.
And that's and Dr. Frank has put back together Mr. T Experience in some iteration, and is touring again, which is incredible.
Are they coming to town?
They're coming to Dallas in December. With the Queers.
I gotta go to that.
I want to go to that
I'm
too.
booked that night, I think.
Oh, man. I'm going to try to go.
I don't think I can cancel.
I never got to see Mr. T Experience either.
I've seen it a few times.
But
way back.
But so... Okay, so back to what we were talking about. So, Matt Riggle...
Punk Damage.
Punk Damage. Gave me this term called Punk Damage, which explains that, and it happens to everybody when they get into punk rock music, that it's all you absorb.
Yeah.
That's it. You've shut yourself off. You're a fucking punk rocker, and that's it. There's nothing else in the world.
let me just jump right in. And Punk Damage for me, it's really weird because once I decided that this is what I was, punk rock and gangster rap and nothing else.
Well, you listen to gangster rap too. See,
Yeah.
I even excluded
But
that.
I didn't exclude that. But I did shut off pop rap.
Okay.
You
fair
know,
enough.
I mean, I can't even explain it, but
Well, so
how did I end up that way?
I think for me, I even blocked that. I literally listened to. I was like, I remember having Beatles posters on my walls because I've always been the biggest Beatles fan.
Yeah.
I remember having Beatles posters on my walls and angrily ripping them off, like tearing them up.
Fuck this, I'm punk now.
I'm a punk rocker. I don't listen to this bullshit anymore.
Yeah.
And
I wrote Nirvana sucks.
yeah, you did.
Said some terrible things.
You did.
You can't say that stuff anymore.
And this went on with me for a decade at least, where I didn't listen to, and the point is, the punk damage.
I don't think it went on for a decade, man. I think that I can clearly remember getting into jazz when I was 18. I got a couple of jazz albums for my birthday, and I got absorbed, and that was the end of Punk Damage for me. Once I started to hear jazz, I started to seek out music stuff, and I think around the same time, you started to get into into country.
Yeah, I did start getting into country, that's true. And we've talked about this before.
But I'd say from the time we were 14 to the time we were 18,
I don't know, dude.
we were close. I mean, it's a good 4 or 5.
Maybe so.
I don't think it's as long as you think.
Maybe not. Maybe you're right. But
5 or 6 years though. There was a solid 5 years where if it wasn't punk or gangster rap, that I didn't even want you to play it in your car. I'd make fun of you.
Right.
I'd bully you around if you didn't like cool music.
Well, the point is that beyond being punk rockers, which till the day I die, I live by a punk rock ethos.
Yeah, we don't have to put it in quotes.
Well, you're right.
We were there when it was first fine.
I still live by a hardcore punk rock ethos. But beyond that, I was a musician and a music fan. And you and I both lost, at the minimum, several years of discovering music.
It was the prime time for me to be learning.
Me too.
And I was a musician. I mean, all the way. You were too. And it's like, instead of I'm not saying like we should have got completely wrapped up in jazz when we were kids, but we should have been like learning like you're a bass player. That would have been a really cool time for you to find James Jamerson.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just one example.
I was listening to.
I was a guitar player.
Freeman.
That would have been a prime time for me to learn all the Jimi Hendrix solos. But instead, I cut all of that off until I was about 18.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I really feel like mine was longer than that. But either way, the point is that.
Well, you continued to play.
years-
Like I gave it up, kinda. But you continued to be in punk bands
until
like
2 years ago.
But like. That's for sure, but you opened up to every other kind of music.
I did.
Way back.
I did. Well, I'll tell you what happens with everybody, and this happens with everybody that gets punk damaged, is that everybody has, even when you're suffering from extreme punk damage syndrome, everybody has some...
EPS?
Yeah, everybody...
EPDS.
EPDS.
It's probably already something.
Everybody has some, what they would call, what's the word, what's the word I'm looking for, like, some secret things that they're into. You know what I mean? Like some...
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, we went through... And this might be punk. It's not punk. But at the time, we might have thought it somehow was. But we went through... There was this moment in time in like 1997...
I'm scared of what you're about to say right now.
Or 1998... Where there was this bullshit modern swing music.
Oh, yeah.
And rockabilly that... There's some merits to rockabilly.
You should flash it a picture of me when I had a pompadour and creepers on.
There is some cool rockabilly from the old days, but there was also this moment in 1997, 1998, maybe 1999. I mean, I'm just gonna say Squirrel Nut Zippers and stop there.
I saw those guys alive.
What were we thinking?
Well, but I'll give you an example. Like, I remember being...
But they seemed... when you saw a picture of them...
It had some kind of punk thing to it.
When you saw a picture of them, they seemed punk.
Because it was different or something.
We were getting old... We were also getting old enough to, like, the whole Grease thing was... We were at an age group where... I don't know.
No, I get you.
I can't justify it. I had that CD.
That's funny.
I can't justify it.
Put a lid on it. What's that you say? No, I remember though I remember hearing Ben Folds. Ben Folds 5 at the time. It was before he's solo. And thinking, holy shit, I love this. I love this. But I couldn't tell.
Other musicians our age or brought us those influences.
Well, you know what's funny?
Josh Huck actually opened me up to...
he opened us up to
He opened me up to Weezer.
He introduced me to Neutral Milk Hotel.
But I'm going to say, through Punk Damage and everything, I listened to Weezer Blue Album.
That was
because there was a time after 8th grade where for like 2 or 3 weeks straight, Weezer Blue Album was just my favorite one to put on. It just hit so hard.
Great album, yeah.
Wall of sound, you know?
Yeah.
However, because of Punk Damage, I never heard Pinkerton until Josh Huck was like, you like Blue Album, why haven't you heard Pinkerton?
Pinkerton's still to this day one of my favorite albums.
Yeah, it's great.
But no, the point is, side note, what I was going to say is that even, like, if you, Ben Folds, if you ask him now, he's like, yeah, we were a punk band with no guitar. So even though I felt like I couldn't listen to him because I was, you know,
yeah, he was
rock,
because he wasn't punk.
He's a punk rocker. Like it all comes from I'm naturally drawn to that arena. Like there's something about it. Like I don't know, man.
No, I know. So what are some of the first? Let's think about this for a second. When we're in our later driving age, what are some of the for me outside of rap? I'm going to exclude that because I listen to a lot of rap, but outside of rap and punk, what are some of the first things that influenced us away from that? Just closing our minds. Let me take just another minute to say, when I really got into punk, I was really into guitar, but I decided that it was stupid to like learn a guitar solo from, like, Eric Clapton was stupid, Jimi Hendrix was stupid, the Beatles were stupid. Like I always listen to the Beatles, actually.
I mean, me too.
But what the fuck, you know? I was like, it was like, I don't need to know any of that. That's not what I'm punk. I'm punk. So stupid.
No, I know it is stupid.
You know,
it is stupid.
Just shutting off of music.
I'll tell you what it was for me. Beyond listening to bands that got me out of my punk damage, I also kind of naturally evolved, and this may be a cop-out, what I'm about to say. This is a cop-out, but it's true.
Well, say it to me, but it's a cop-out.
I evolved into, let me take a step back. I was in a band at the time called the Jerkets.
Mm-hmm.
And we played fucking
Wait, that's the band where Burns played? No,
that was me, Dave, Justin, and Marco.
That's right.
And we played punk rock music, hardcore punk rock music.
They were like fizzly punk.
But guess what? Right about that time, things started happening where bands like At the Drive-In, Fugazi.
Punk changed. Punk changed.
And there was a thing called post-hardcore.
Emo.
Punk hardcore, or post-hardcore rather.
Emo infiltrated punk.
And so that kind of naturally happened with me where when I started hearing those bands and I was like, I really like this. And it kind of reminds me of Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was easier for me to move away from it. And I remember specifically hearing, I'll tell you something I've never thought about this until right now, but I remember very specifically listening to Electric Light Orchestra, the album Time, which is still one of my favorite albums.
It's a great album.
That was one of the big ones that was like, what am I doing? I've got to explore more music. I've got to explore more music. And then I kind of followed in your footsteps, I got more into jazz. I had already been listening to country for a while. Kind of open mind though.
A few things happened. I was getting older and I was getting more into guitar, even though I was pretty much still just punk. I was getting more into guitar, and my dad, or maybe my mom, came to me and was like, Uncle Mark says his Uncle
Mark is one of the best guitar players that's ever lived.
they go, Uncle Mark will teach you guitar, if you'll learn from him. And
I didn't know this either.
really unrelated to Uncle Mark, but that at that same moment, I go, okay, Jimi Hendrix is my new punk rock. And I got where like all I listened to was Hendrix.
I remember that
for like 2 years.
Yeah, I
or
remember
something.
that. I remember that.
But at the same time, Mark would work with me like every couple of weeks. This is before we started recording. Before I got a sound card. Before we could record.
Okay.
He gave me the Green Book. This is when we lived at the barn. When we first moved to the barn. He gave me the Green Music Theory book. And I started studying that and meeting with him. He'd show me a lick or something. It was rock stuff. It wasn't
show you a
jazz.
lick.
That's so weird. So weird.
Try to recover from that, cowboy.
When the thing fades out and then fades back in, you'll know what happened. I'm having a hard time recovering from that. Yeah, he would show me guitar stuff, music stuff, and talk about music theory with me.
I had no idea this happened.
And so, I got into Hendrix at that moment, and I guess I just tried to latch onto something that was musical. You know? I think that's really where that came from. Also, it was the beginning of being able to download music, and
that changed everything.
I found
I was going to say that a minute ago.
You know what's funny? Let's talk about this for just a second. When I got Napster, I downloaded punk rock for like about a week. Mm-hmm. And then
I realized the whole world was open.
What else can I get? What else can I hear?
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Yeah, no, I was going to mention that earlier.
Oh my gosh.
That the beginning of Napster really kind of changed everything, because you're right. That's when it was like, yeah, you could make an MP3 with 85 punk rock songs on it, but after that...
Look, Spotify is great, but I wish that I could still watch the thing,
the
Bargo.
Man. Watch the Bargo.
Now you just watch the Bargo as you listen to the song.
Yeah. And if it flubs at all...
I didn't think about this at all or put it together until right this moment.
No, yeah, the fact that and that's what I was trying to...
Napster, dude.
That's what I was trying to say earlier, is that we were on the tail end of trading mixtapes, going into being able to a world where you could listen to whatever you want,
hear anything,
whenever you
anytime,
want.
anything.
And that changed everything for everybody. And that's also why I'm not that old fucking curmudgeon punk rocker that's like, punk's dead. But it is different. Because to hear Cocksparrer back in the day, you couldn't just do it.
I mean...
You had to earn it.
Yeah, you did. You had to talk somebody into giving you the money to buy the CD
and find
the
it.
tape. Okay, and another side note to this, just an interesting just a little momentary tangent. We had to make tapes for each other. When I was in 9th grade for Christmas, I begged my parents to buy me a CD burner.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, I started every time a friend would come over with music, I'd look through their CDs and be like, "Let me make a copy of this." And I started copying CDs.
Yeah.
And that helped.
Yeah.
It didn't help my punk damage, but it helped me get more punk albums.
Well, it's funny that it's funny that we're talking about this right now, because I am over it. I listen to the gamut of music.
To be honest, I still only listen to the punk, like the 45 albums.
I was just about to say.
I don't know about you, but I mainly listen to the same 50 albums that I listened to in 1999.
Dude, if I showed you my search history on Spotify, or what I've been listening to, you'd be like, Chris, this is the same shit you've been listening to for 30 years. Because it is. Yeah. It's that way.
I've got on my 1990s website, I have a list of... It just goes Bird Snake's favorite punk albums, and it's just a text list, no links or anything.
Did it say Bird Snake?
Yeah, it's birdsnakebrown.com.
Oh wow, okay. But anyways, yeah, that changing really did change everything. Like going into an era where you can kind of listen to whatever you wanted to, whenever you wanted to, changed everything.
Yeah. Well, for me, it really, like, all of a sudden I was like, maybe I'll listen to Beethoven, like. Because I had seen Clockwork Orange a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But now I could blast it on my...
There you go. There's that punk rock influence
now
again, though, too.
Clockwork Orange. But now I could blast Beethoven on my stereo. And then it was like... oh, now let's listen to the White Album. My parents like that. Like, or just whatever. Like, I like not my parents like that. I like the Beatles.
No, I've always liked the Beatles.
But there was a moment in Napster where it was like, I remember that album. Let's give it a try now.
Yeah.
That had never happened.
No, I did that too. Where we talk about punk rock, and that's when it started happening and everything. But the fact is that what got me into music was Guns N' Roses and Metallica.
Oh my God, I spent countless hours with Appetite for Destruction and Lies.
And because of that, when music started going back to that, where you could listen to whatever, I started listening to that stuff again too, and thought, wow, this is really why I did this.
Do you remember at the music store, there weren't really books for musicians, but it would have the lyrics and pictures. It would be just a book, like sort of like a tabletop book. It'd be the lyrics to the songs and pictures.
I don't remember that.
They bought me the one from Guns N' Roses, Lies, and then they looked through it and were like, you can look at the pictures, but you can't read it.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I was young, and you know my dad, very conservative, very straight-laced. When I was young, 10 probably, and I was really into Guns N' Roses and Metallica. He knew I was into heavy metal and he hated it, and he was like, I want to read some of those lyrics. And I gave him the lyrics to, I was smart enough at that age to give him the lyrics to Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet instead. And he was like, okay, I guess this is all right.
When I was in 6th grade, I went to my mom's house, my grandma, and I took Blood Sugar Sex Magic with me on CD, and no, on tape, I think. Tapers, I don't know, on a Walkman.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was CD or
I had
tape.
it on tape back then.
And I left put the disc in the Walkman and was sitting in the living room. And after a while, I realized my grandma was talking about the lyrics, and she had got a hold of it, and she was like, "This is like pornography and music."
But it's also completely nonsensical.
It's that Apache Rose Peacock, you know. So my mom was like, "Christopher, you can't listen to this." And then for a few days, I'd be like, "You gotta give me that CD. You gotta give me that tape back or whatever."
To your mom?
And to my parents.
And you're like 10.
My dad finally was like, "You have to give him the Red Hot Chili Peppers back." Yeah.
That's really funny, dude. That's really funny. I remember buying similarly. I had several similar experiences with my parents.
Can you imagine the conversations they must have had? They've been like, "He already knows about this stuff." Like,
Right. You know how
that's how my parents found out I knew about adult content, like from the Red Hot Chili Peppers lyrics.
That's so funny.
That's weird.
I used to get in a little shit with, like, every once in a while things would pop up. Like, I remember my mom found that I had bought the Screeching Weasel 7-inch You Broke My Fucking Heart, and was really bummed about that.
The F word?
Yeah, just the F word in general. Yeah. Was really bummed about that. Like, I was like, that's very minimal in comparison to what I'm listening to.
Speaking of 7 inches, one of the things I got back in the old days of Offbeat Records that I still have is Green Day Slappy from Lookout Records.
Interesting.
The original deal. Besides Ben Folds, what broke your punk damage? For me, it was getting into music and Hendrix, and then a little bit later than that, the guy that played sax for my dad's band gave me a Mingus CD. And Jack DeJohnette, but the Mingus CD is what really affected me. Man,
mine was really, honestly, and I told you earlier, it's not a cop-out, it's that I started following, I realized that even within the punk rock realm, there was more there. Like, when I got into bands like At the Drive-In and No Means No, and
yeah,
you know what I mean? And
and it's funny because I didn't get that, I didn't really get into any of those bands, but it was a time period when me and you kind of hung out less, but we still hung out like every other day. I mean, we still hung out all the time, but you got into other stuff. Also, like, turning 21. Yeah. For you, I know that your music taste changed when you got to the bar and met more people that had deep music change.
That is very, very interesting that you say that, because wow, man, that's really, there was a time when I was going to the bar when there's definitely a soundtrack that changed everything for me. Like, it changed everything for me.
That same time for me is about the first year, the year where we're just old enough to get in bars is about the first year that I played live. That I played in cover bands.
Yeah, that's true.
And
yeah.
so I started to find out about music that everybody like.
Yeah.
Stuff that old people love to sing. I guess that's the best way to put it.
No, so I was still playing in punk rock bands at the time, or hardcore bands, or whatever. But meanwhile, there were these songs coming out of the jukebox at the bar that I was going to that were very nostalgic for me because I was drunk all the time. And, I mean, things like the Flaming Lips were coming up.
Oh, man, Flaming Lips were great.
And the Shins, and, oh man, what else? Like, Guided by Voices and Built to Spill, and just things that were pavement.
Is this video we got Chris and Chris list bands?
Chris and Chris list band. Man, I just know. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that. But
I remember that time in my life because you came around less. Because there was a time when we hung out like five days a week, and you were with your girlfriend for like 2 days a week. You know.
Yeah.
She was with you if you weren't with. I don't know, but when you got old enough to get into the bar, we still hung out, but it was more like 3 days a week.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I was looking for new girls.
Your music, your music taste definitely changed.
Wow, that's cool that you
during
brought that
time,
up because it's something I never pieced together. But yeah, that's when it happened, I think.
I think this is where we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, man, this is really fun. I think we should do another one.
Well, hey guys, Fido's Revenge podcast number 1. I think we'll do this again. I wouldn't say it'll always be about music or punk, but it'll always be us talking.
For sure.
I mean, maybe we'll have a friend drop by sometime, but
yeah, for sure. I have a when we talk about gear, I've already talked to a couple of drummers that are like, "Oh, have me over when we want to talk about drums."
Just talk about drums.
And I'm like, no one gives a shit about drums.
I'll have to go online and research what drummers like.
I also have
just ask Google, what do drummers like?
Right, what do drummers like? I also have flat earthers that would love to come on and hang out and talk.
I think I could maybe drag some longtime pro, local musicians in.
Okay. Yeah.
I might be able to drag somebody that's been playing in clubs for 20 or 30, old guys even.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to do was play guitars together, on film.
It would kind of be cool to take like the Martin and the Taylor, and you play one, I play one, but we just both make a G chord and talk about the difference in sound. That's something I've really been wanting to do. It can't do it yourself. You can't hold it and play it and then switch them. You can't tell the difference.
Interesting. Okay.
So, anyway, hey, this has been the first Fido's Revenge podcast. Thanks for watching.
Peace. I've never done that in my life.